Hi, Reza. Actually, is Reza pronounced perfectly? So after all these years, this is the right question.
To be honest, there is no right or wrong. It's a multicultural name. It is used across the Arab world, the Persian world, and South Asia, and now the United States. So you can pretty much pick whatever pronunciation you want. I myself do not pronounce it correctly. I pronounce myself Reza,
Reza?
which is not necessarily accurate. So if you went and asked a person of a more Arab background, hey, is that the correct pronunciation? They would tell you
Okay.
no.
So Reza, I think this is how I called you usually.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is fine.
Perfect. So now the second most important question is what was your first computer?
My first computer was actually a Mac. Now, what version of a Mac I cannot possibly tell you. It was a really small thing. I think it has a 6-inch screen, one end or the other. It was in color, so
Hmm.
it did display a desktop. But in most of the times, I wasn't in the desktop. I was most of the time using the command line. I think it was Apple IIe, but don't quote me on it. It's a very early version, one of the very earliest versions of a PC. Effectively, is what I had.
How old were you and how you got it?
I was, it's so long now, I don't really remember, to be honest with you. It must have been something like 16 or 17.
Oh, okay.
My original interest was economics.
Hmm.
So I was sort of in a very advanced placement course in economics. And part of that advanced placement thing, a lot of people were interested at this point in time in computing because in the end, economics is actually a lot of number crunching. So computers have a real usage, a real mission critical usage in economics. There
Hmm.
was a separate wing of this academy that was specifically computer club at that point in time. So we literally had 5 machines, and courtesy of the British government, actually. So this is in the British Embassy School. All of this was happening in the British Embassy School. And then this was a courtesy of the British government to say, yes, we will send 5 computers, for these people, for these students to try out outside of Great Britain. And that's how I actually got into computers in the first place.
So you grew up in Great Britain.
No, no, no. This is South Asia.
Ah, okay. Because they were interesting. I think you are
But
from Boston or something.
it's a British Embassy School.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
So you were very good at Excel back then, right?
Excel, did we even have Excel? I don't think we had Excel on the Mac. What did we have? We had Fox Pro,
Fox Pro.
I
Okay.
think. I think was the spreadsheet program
Hmm.
on the Mac at the time.
And you got the machine and you were immediately interested in numbers or more gaming?
Yes, primarily. So then in the computer club, there's a number of people that had many different interests. Me going into it, my primary interest was data analysis
Hmm.
using something like Fox Pro, and Fox Pro, in fact, had a built-in programming language
Hmm.
that allowed you to write more or less macros, right? So you'd be able to do analysis inside of this spreadsheet program. But ultimately, what happened was there was other people that were doing various things, like for example, game development.
Hmm.
But in order to get into game development, what you actually most people start with is writing fractal algorithms. I don't know if you know what those are. They're rather old-fashioned. So there's essentially bitmap programs on the screen
Hmm.
that you write algorithms to say, hey, this particular dot will appear in this coordinate on the screen, and it will appear in this color. So you can program these type of very complicated fractal equations, and ultimately it looks like interesting screen designs. If you're interested, I think there's still some fractal-based screensavers out there, and in fact, some of the really old machines may use fractal programs as
Interesting.
their
This is
screen
Mandelbrot, right?
saving
This
program.
Mandelbrot. This is like the fractal, right? So it
Yeah.
generate, yeah. But I didn't knew that it's actually. I think most of the things happened with sprites, right? So
Back then, it was really literally you would write a very complicated mathematical algorithm that would determine where a dot would be placed on screen and which coordinate and which color it would represent. And literally, it was a complex mathematical formulas to determine that. For
interesting.
a given
So
time loop, for let's say 10 seconds, this is where all of your your placements dots in the screen would look like. That's literally what was fractal program was.
Asteroids, I think, were made this way, right? This was like a
Yes,
scale.
quite
This was
right.
like a
Yeah.
vectors, but I think what they're saying here is no. The asteroids was all about that. So,
Yep. I assume it's probably very similar to a fractals algorithm. Yes.
and you were into programming back then, or still number crunching?
No, no. Very quickly, I actually wound up being on the moving to the other side of the equation. So I did number crunching for some, sort of my coursework, but really for fun, I was literally doing this as a fractal design for some
Okay.
time.
So you had also some fun. So you're not always serious, right?
Right.
So if I meet you, I always try to bring you to laughing, but it's really hard. You're a very, very serious man. Lots of jokes, but you are always you're always on point. So, okay, one time I will manage to do that, right?
Perhaps, yes. I'm trying to, improve my sense of humor as well. Perhaps I would fit in very well in Germany. You guys also do not have much of a sense of humor,
Yeah,
right?
we are no, they are better than Mr. Bean. Hey, so okay, so you spent some time in the computer club, and then you started to gaming or programming games.
No. So I started fractal programs for some time. Primarily, I was using computers for my coursework, very advanced coursework in economics.
And you never played. You had to play some games, right?
To be honest, never had the time. I was busy doing so many things. I was also president of the debate club and doing some event
President of Debate
organization.
Club. What is that? So this seems like almost like I didn't want it to say a company, not Microsoft, but what a president of Debate Club has to do.
Primarily get the thing running. So, it's not so much about being good in debate, it's actually organizational skills.
Okay.
So, organizing events, organizing the people that would actually be doing the debates, organizing mentoring sessions.
And what the debates were about was like, I mean,
Really anything. The debate programs in school are primarily a little bit more academic. So literally, we would take debates that you would find in books from ancient Greek philosophers like
okay,
Socrates, and you could debate those points.
interesting. So I never had such German school. This is why I'm asking, because it sounds interesting. Debate club.
Um,
So I will tomorrow use it in meeting. I will call them. We are a debate club. Let's see what happens, right?
yeah, so I was, I just had so many different things going on. Yeah, I didn't really have much time to do things for purely leisure other than writing some fractal programs here and there.
So you also know the most joy you ever had with computer was writing, fractal programs as a teenager, right?
Yeah, and also I was playing guitar at the time. Also, a little bit later, I had a band for about 2 years. So yeah, I didn't have much time
But
to
not
do
classic guitar, hopefully, right? So something more
no
fun.
electric guitar. Yeah,
So
rhythm guitar.
I suspected you will tell me you had no time for electric guitars and you only played, classic guitar. But okay, so now the question: what do you played? So like a rhythm guitar or what? And
Rhythm guitar.
okay,
Yeah.
and who was your idol?
At the time, we were covering Sepultura, some Megadeth, and some early Metallica.
Wow. Okay, Sepultura is unusual. It's a Brazilian band, right?
Brazilian groove metal band, yes.
With the first CD as Roots, I think, right?
I think they were pretty much always based out of Sao Paulo.
Yeah,
pretty much
but the name of the album was Roots.
Oh, Roots was later. Yes.
Later, really?
Roots, I believe, was in 1994 or 1995. So earliest was Beneath the Remains.
Okay.
And then that may have been the very, very first album. Roots is much later. And then there was Chaos AD before that.
Chaos AD,
Chaos AD, I
exactly.
believe, is in 1992, yes.
Interesting. And you were able to play that?
Yes.
Wow.
Reasonably well.
So you had to practice a lot, right? I mean,
Yes. This is why I tell you I didn't have to.
yeah, okay, this is reasonable. I think you didn't have time, because of the debate club, but this makes more sense. Okay, this is what I understand. Okay, cool. So you were actually a heavy metal player, right? So Megadeth and Sepultura and Metallica. And you can still play guitar right now?
No.
Nothing.
No. I now do not have time for other reasons, right? Between blogging and Jakarta and microprofile and
But you can
My
still,
day job, which is more than 40 hours, and then I have a family. It's like
but you could still play, right? So if you get a guitar, you could play something. Nothing.
I can play, but I mean, to be honest, I have not played anything serious for almost 15 years.
Yeah, but still, I think after one day of practice, you could play something, right? Something simple.
Possibly,
This would be
possibly. But
interesting. Next time I
yeah,
will
but
ask you.
something like rhythm guitar for playing Metallica or Megadeth or any of the heavy metal genres is not so simple. I would have to get myself acclimated to speed and accuracy.
Yeah, sure, but
That is the key.
some accords and some simple stuff you could play. Maybe
Simple stuff.
okay. This is what I wanted to know whether after 15 years of not practicing, you would still able to play. Would be interesting experiment.
Yes, but it would be very basic. Like I say, for something like groove metal and thrash metal and heavy metal, most people don't realize it, but it's not so much about technique. It's actually speed and accuracy, and that takes a lot of practice to get right.
Yes.
You can't just pick it up and begin to do it. It's like saying, "Oh, I know how to ride a bike. I can mountain bike up the Alps right away."
Yeah, this is harder.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So, how long you played guitar? 2 years, you said?
2.5 years. Not very long.
Yeah, but before you started to play, you had to practice, or was it in 2.5 years? After 2.5 years, you were able to play Sepultura.
So purely practice was probably about 6 months.
Wow.
But we practiced together as a band.
Okay.
So I would say we played decent after about year and a half. Yeah, and then
But
we
it's a
were
crazy
out
fast.
of
I mean, I think estimate that you will need far more time, to practice. So it's interesting that after 1 year you were able to play it.
1.5 counting. Just a regular. Everybody starts on a regular acoustic guitar, right?
Mhm.
So electric guitar you cannot pick up right away.
Okay,
You
cool.
need to learn the chords. You need to mostly learn the chords without. Because what happens is a guitar is a guitar, right? So you're at the end of the day, even when you're playing an electric guitar, you're really playing an acoustic guitar. But there's another skill set altogether when you add electric in the mix, because what is really happening is you are significantly altering the sound that an acoustic guitar would produce. So it's yet another level of skill, yes. But it's possible. If you dedicate yourself, I think, if it is possible to get within covering, not original music, but covering something like Megadeth and Metallica and Sepultura within about 2 years. Yes.
Okay, cool. Okay, so after 3 years, I think you started to program, because why you stopped playing guitar, and what happened, with your computer stuff? So
what happened was I graduated high school. I decided to come to the United States, and being in a dorm room was just not very conducive to playing guitar, and also I had very heavy course load. And so on. So yeah, what continued was economics and computer science.
You studied both.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
This is hard, right?
I actually have a major in computer science and economics, and I also have a minor in mathematics. And for some period of time, I actually considered a minor in philosophy as well. So I have many interests. I have trouble focusing my interests in my early years.
Yeah, but this is crazy. So this is why you had no time. I mean, and you studied how long? 4 years?
4 years, yeah, typical.
But this was like full time, right? I mean,
full-time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was fun, or you regret, the decision to study multiple things at once?
No. I would say, my entire lifespan, college was the most, probably the easiest going and the most rewarding part of it. So yeah, definitely I don't have many regrets.
Okay.
About that. No, I do have some regrets of whether I should have moved to the UK or the United States. Ultimately, because once you do that, you're kind of set in your trajectory, and that's how I'm a US citizen today. Sometimes I question whether that was really the right decision for me or not.
Okay, so you never know, really. So because
True.
People in UK will ask the same question,
Perhaps.
So, yeah. I would say this is okay. But how much time you dedicated during your study, for computers? So you were just you were just into programming, or more the other stuff what was the interest? Your interest.
The interest in the initial years, the interest was using computing as a way of advancing economics. In later years, my third year, I simply just finished my economics major just because I wanted to, but it was clear by then that I was, in terms of my career, I was moving more in the computer science direction. Yes.
Cool. And which
I
programming
would say
languages you used back then during your study?
Java. No, not Java the whole time. Java the last 3 years because my university was one of the ones that received funding from Sun,
Huh.
and Sun gave us many of the all of our machines in the computer science department.
Mhm.
I think this is about 40 or perhaps something along those lines computers. They were all Solaris machines.
Mhm.
All Spark machines running Solaris, and yeah, Java was a programming language.
So which Java was it? JDK 1.0, I guess, right?
It's something like that, yes. Obviously, from at the very beginning, yes.
You
I
remember the
think by the
IDE?
time,
Was it Sun's Java Studio workshop?
I didn't pick up an IDE until like maybe my fourth year. Originally, it was simply Pico and
Huh.
VI
Mhm.
and Emacs to do development, and simply Java C, and
Mhm.
later on, simply using Maven as a command line. I think in the end, Visual Cafe.
Okay.
At that time, it was not part of Sun.
Yeah.
It was a separate company, Visual
Semantic.
Cafe.
Semantic Visual Cafe. I use it a lot. It looks. It's a nice look and feel with there's yellow with lots of coffee logos. So I really liked to use Visual. And what Visual Cafe had back then was the possibility to create a native app from Java, almost like GraalVM right now.
Yep. Yeah. I
And,
also had a nice swing and AWT wizard also.
and what you did with Java, just for number crunching, right? You use Java as for
No, it was all the coursework was done in Java.
Mhm.
Even I remember in our artificial intelligence courses, we wrote genetic algorithms and neural networks in Java. And then I was also working part time actually, for the university, and we were developing applets at the time. Applets and CGI written in Perl. That was the bleeding edge.
Yeah, crazy.
of-
Where you studied? Which university was it?
That's a very small four-year college. It's called Gettysburg College. It's in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania.
Okay, because it sounds Sun sponsored all the machines, so it was like an interesting story.
Yep. Yep. Sun sponsored all the machines. Sun actually, I remember the one time Sun sent one of their evangelists to come speak with us about like the future of Java and what type of career path we should be pursuing and so on. So Sun back then was very smart about reaching educational institutions. I think it's unfortunate they don't do that anymore.
Yeah, Sun cannot do this anymore, but yeah. And interesting. Okay, so what? So first, you like Java. This is the first question because I assume back before Java you had the Fox Pro experience and you created some macros. You said so. What was your opinion
And
about
C.
Java?
The fractals were written in C. So
On C, okay.
yeah. So Fox Pro is not a serious programming language. It's something like Visual Basic, if you will. So it's more procedural than it is object oriented. It's not really intended to be a general purpose programming language. So it doesn't actually count. For me, honestly, Java was not very different from C. It was just you're not doing all those. What is that mem something like literally allocating
malloc and
malloc. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, we're not really doing those malloc allocations, but other than that, it was frankly very similar to the C syntax. It wasn't.
But you were not excited about Sun and Solaris and Java somehow, so we were very pragmatic about Java back then, right?
Yes, of course. Back then, I think it was relatively obvious that really the only choices were .NET or whatever Microsoft at the time was doing. To be honest, Visual Basic was not very interesting as a programming language. They had J++ for some time, but that was just a derivative of Java. So in some ways, Java was the only game in town at that period in time, yes.
So what happened after your university? So what was your first job?
I got a job, basically. Ultimately, I got a job with Accenture, which is at that point in time, having Java development skills would basically guarantee you a job.
Yeah. Grow or go, right? Was the slogan of Accenture, I remember.
Right. Yeah. Still is, yeah.
Still is. Okay, and how much time you spent at Accenture?
I don't know how much I should discuss this, but Accenture convinced me so the answer is very short period of time.
Okay.
The reason for this is my experience at Accenture convinced me that consulting is definitely something I wanted to do for some period of time, but also convinced me that if I was to do consulting, I should work for myself rather than work for a consulting firm. I think working for a consulting firm basically takes away from the experience of being a consultant, why you would want to be a consultant in the first place.
Okay, so after then we became freelancer?
Yes, almost 10, 12 years.
I didn't knew that. I thought you worked for the application server company. I forgot the nice
Yeah,
one.
I did. So I had a stint in Gaucho.
Coucho, exactly.
Then I took a job with Oracle as evangelist, and yeah. So eventually, I sort of transitioned away from being a consultant, and I got what I think, basically, here's the thing. I did as much consulting as it made sense for me, in terms of gaining real world experience. And the opportunity opened up because of doing all the blogging and the JCP work and writing the book and everything. It opened up opportunities for me to join essentially people that were driving the technology, like Culture, like Oracle, of course now to some extent Microsoft. And I think that's the transition point.
Yeah, you are too fast. I met you at Java 1, and I knew you because of your EJB in Action book, I think.
Possible. Yeah, it was very popular back then.
Very popular. And you had long hairs.
Yes, I did. I had long hair for almost, I want to say 17 or something like 20 years. And then
But you looked like, I remember, like a prodigy character, so what I remember. So, and I had a brief chat with you. You didn't knew me and at all, because I think it was one of my first Java ones. I don't know. I remember I met you the first time, and I asked you how the EJB book is going, and you say, okay, cool, it sells well. And why I found you, because I really liked Coucho back then. So there was the application server Resin, which was very fast, and I used a lot WebLogic, and you were very vocal about Resin, right? Could it be that you wrote blogs about Resin, Coucho?
a few, yeah. So frankly, Resin did to some extent, what maybe Quarkus is doing more successfully now. And that is what I originally, when I joined Resin, that was my objective. Resin was essentially a servlet container for a long time, and then they wanted to become a full Java EE container. And my reason behind joining Resin was to essentially revisit the entire concept of a application server and go away from something like certainly old school WebLogic and WebSphere traditional into something that is more lightweight and more modular. So I actually really like Glassfish. Ultimately, I wound up joining the Glassfish team. But Resin, if it was done properly, could have been really a very modular application server and very lightweight.
And very fast, right? I think it was used by eBay back then or something, or
Yes.
a large company.
Yeah, it was used by a few of the big San Francisco Bay Area companies as their main container. Yes.
And when you wrote the EJB in Action book, was before or after Resin? Accenture wouldn't. Before?
Before. Yeah. Primarily, I wrote that book as an independent consultant. As an independent consultant, you have a little bit of time on your hands, and you have a little bit of control over what you can do. So.
And the book was sold well back then?
It still is, surprisingly. I still, when I get my revenue statements, it still sells a few hundred a year, which to me is very mind-boggling.
This is crazy. This is perfect. Yeah. And was your only book? Because or you wrote
only, yeah. Obviously, the reason I went away from books, nothing against books. Like I know a lot of people write books, but in my view, I think at that point in time, my realization was if your primary objective is making money or creating an author brand, then writing a book is fine. But actually, blogging is a much more effective way of reaching an audience. I switched from writing books into writing articles primarily for bZone and TSS at the time, the server side.
I wrote books usually if I was on the road. So in trains, hotels. This was and blogs. I try to write shorter posts. So mostly, if I was in taxi, this was the time to write a blog post. And books was in trains and Java One conference flights and something like this. And for me, it was I didn't thought about that. I said, okay, this is that time, just do something useful. So I wrote the book. So this was like there was no strategy behind, also no blocking. I just said, okay, I learned something. I'm forced to think about the topic a little bit more, go deeper, and this is how why I did it. So this was always my motivation a little bit, to be forced to learn stuff and or to expose yourself to criticism. So this is sometimes what I do at conferences. I talk about more aggressively about a topic and see what happens. And if no one says no, so okay, maybe there is something in it, right? So this was my ideas
Sure.
to validate my ideas with audience.
Yeah, for me, I mean, this is about reaching. It's about having an impact, if you will, right? And to be honest,
Yeah.
writing books limits your audience a little bit,
Hmm.
right? Because somebody has to be interested in your book. They need to know about it.
Yeah.
They need to read, and it takes them, maybe a week or so to read your book versus writing a blog entry. And these days, even maybe producing a video or writing a tweet, well, that takes a much shorter time for you to produce and shorter time for the person on the other end to consume.
Okay.
And it can be more easily consumed.
So then we
If you're
met regularly at Java One mostly, and then you
yes,
left Resin, I think, right? So your
yeah,
trajectory was Accenture, writing a book, becoming freelancer. Then you joined Resin. Then you left Resin.
Oracle,
Coucho. Resin
sure,
was
yeah,
the product, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Then Oracle, and then
And
more,
then you
more
became
Microsoft.
Oracle evangelist, right, for Java E, I think,
That's
and
right.
with
Because I
Glassfish,
remember.
with Arun
Yeah,
Gupta, exactly. And who was this the French guy, the nice one, Alexis?
Alexis, yeah, but he left shortly after the Oracle acquisition, so yeah, he didn't
Okay,
play.
so you stick longer, and
Yeah, it was me and Arun for some time.
exactly. And what I really saw that you are really straight line. What you did, you just did it. You supported, for instance, Java and Jakarta the entire time. You even ping me and say, "Hey, Adam, wake up!" I say, "Okay, everything is fine." And you were always, the how to call it, the guardian, right? You are the guardian of Jakarta, Java, right? What was the name? Guardian. You
Java
initiated.
Guardians back then, yes. It was necessary, without doing that work, I'm not saying that Jakarta is a success yet, but definitely it would have been dead in the water had we not done that work at that point in time, yes.
Why you were so interested in Java and Jakarta? So, what was your
Well,
motivation?
I have
Or still is,
fundamentally,
still is. You're still
actually,
very active in the mailing list, and you are always spent a lot of time supporting the community. So why you are still interested, and why you were interested and are still interested, right?
actually has to do with very deep in my background. So I deliver a talk about this. It's called Freakonomic Take on Open Standards in Jakarta. This is, if you go down to it, right to the kernel of it. This is the primary reason I support Jakarta and to a lesser extent microprofile. And this has to do with the observation that if this becomes a single vendor dominated ecosystem, it will not be as competitive. One of the reasons Java is so successful is because many significant companies have a vested interest in making it successful, and that includes Red Hat, includes IBM, includes Oracle, included Sun back then, Payara, Tommy, and a lot of people. And so it's not just one company. The alternative, there's reasons why it's either that or it's a single vendor dominated ecosystem. Problem with single vendor dominated ecosystems are they're not going to be as effective because if there's no real vested core interest in advancing the technology by many parties, it simply won't be done. So this is the fundamental reason why I continue to invest my time in keeping Jakarta and microprofile, let's say, viable. Because without it, at longer term, the Java ecosystem will no longer remain competitive.
That's interesting. This is maybe because of your economics background.
Correct. Yeah, that's basically what the talk is about. That's why it's called Freakonomic Take on Open Standards in Jakarta. There's a recording of it. You can take a look at it. I'll explain. I explain in detail, what I just explained to you in a few sentences.
This is interesting because I assumed something different. I thought, you somehow really like Java or whatever, or you promise, to, I don't know, to make it successful or something, and this is why you are always, on the straight path. Because my motivations were completely different. So I was a little bit egoistic. It's okay, if we are standard, I just learn the standard and don't have to chase all the vendors. So this was my motivation a bit. And what also happened, so I didn't have to learn all the implementations. And the cool story is, my clients didn't have either. So they were very portable and really appreciated the decision. This was an accidental decision. And this is why they're coming back and asking for new projects, because it remained compatible over the years. So I was actually lucky a little bit, and it worked well for me for completely different reasons. This was actually the interesting part.
So you should go and see my talk.
Yeah.
Because what you just described is a byproduct of
Yeah.
what I talk about in the core part of my talk. Is what you described is an probably most important byproduct.
So I'm the collateral damage of your idea, right? So you can put it this way.
Perhaps.
Yeah, that's interesting. So and now you're the Microsoft, and my observation is Microsoft reminds me a little bit of Sun Microsystems, strangely enough. So this how they behave from outside a bit, right? So with Visual Studio Code, for instance, right? So this was like they contributed a lot, and now it's usable by the community. Of course, there is some interest, but I mean, there was in marketing, I think, was maybe the one major interest. But what happened was everyone likes Visual Studio Code, I think. So I use it all the time. So I use NetBeans a lot back then. And because I also have to use JavaScript, I switched to Visual Studio Code, and I still use NetBeans from time to time. But because I'm lazy, I'm usually spend all my time with Visual Studio Code, Java, and whatever, right? So, and also, lots of the Sun Microsystems experts or people ended up to being in Microsoft, which is really funny, because I think I heard somewhere that Microsoft is the company with most Java champions, right?
I don't know how much I want to comment on that. Yeah, so reality is maybe not. I think if you look at a company like Red Hat, although they don't talk about it as much, in reality they probably do. There may be other companies that that is equally true of. So I don't know how true that is. Well, what I can tell you is Java at Microsoft is definitely a serious endeavor, but we are at the early stages still.
Yeah, at least a little bit of Minecraft. I mean, I know there's not everything is Java in Minecraft right now. There's also C# Minecraft, how to call it, the Bedrock edition, right? But I mean, still interesting. And what's also happened a lot, I did a podcast with Mr. James Falkner, I think James is the first name, about Azure App Service and JBoss, which was also interesting. So Azure also invests a lot in the Jakarta actually ecosystem, and the observation is, it's also an observation. No, do you remember at Sun there was a Sun Grid cloud project in the early days?
Yes, I remember it back in the literally they put a bunch of Solaris machines on the back of a truck, and that was that was a cloud in a box. Yes.
Yeah, but it was before the Sun Cloud, so it was the first attempt. I think was around 2005, and the idea was that you create a zip and submit it somehow, and then we'll extract it and run. And back then Java E was around, so I said, why they not just accept an EAR or WAR because then we would get serverless the first time, right? So because they could run the servers.
Sure.
I would submit the WAR and EAR. This is what I wanted the entire time. I didn't want to spend time, as I said, with strange vendors and playing with the configuration. And it was not at all that way, but the closest is Azure App Service, something like this, right? Or for instance, the Payara Cloud. It's also similar solution. So the strangely enough is if you take the application servers to the maximum, the idea, you get serverless computing, because it is very similar to Azure Function or AWS Lambda. The Lambda just contains the business logic. Azure Function the same. And the entry point of application server would be a servlet, which is I would say really similar to Azure Function or AWS Lambda, right?
Yeah, in a sense, if you take a serverless as an abstract term, that's yeah, I would say something like JBoss API app service. You can describe it as being sort of serverless Java EE edition, if you will.
Yeah, if you hide the JBoss, right? So if you hide it completely, don't mention JBoss and Azure App Service, and you say, okay, I just submit a war, and what war is, it's just a zip. You don't even have to specify the dependencies. It's just a pure business logic. I would say the only difference between Azure Function or AWS Lambda and a war is that all the classes are in web-inf classes, and in the jar or in the AWS Lambda it's just a zip. So this is the only difference. So technically, very similar, right?
Of course, but as you know, in practicality, it's not as simple as that, right? So
Yeah.
in practicality, you will get into things like configuring your resources via the JBoss CLI. Ultimately, if you want to do something more advanced, like configure security or configure clustering, ultimately you will need to know. Yes, in fact, it is JBoss. But I agree, from a programming adult standpoint, yeah, it's more or less, it's a Java E jar file or var file or EAR file, and yes, simply deploy it.
Yeah. The only problem we get later would be with JDBC connection pooling, because if I would go the JBoss route, the next question is, what about persistence? And maybe on Azure I would choose Cosmos DB, let's say, and then not use the JPA, so just call Cosmos DB via HTTP, which will solve the connection pooling problem. But this is a different discussion. But you don't have to use everything from Java or Jakarta. It really depends on the environment, on the economics model, right?
Yeah, you can use whatever you want. I mean, at the end of the day, I never really understood all the hoopla about this and that. To me, computing is not that expensive. If you look at it from an economic standpoint, the most expensive thing that you have in your development shop is manpower. It's vastly outweighs any infrastructure cost.
Almost.
If
If you think about cloud, so I would say what cloud improves, or I would say what serverless computing improves, is that we can have a development environment which is identical to production environment. This is huge benefit, because you can scale to zero, but you can have still beefy machines. But if you use a real database, let's say Postgres, for instance, in the cloud, it per environment you will pay several hundreds euros a month, and this can.
That is, compare that to a price of a senior developer, right? A good one.
Yeah, but I can tell you, companies have problem with it. So if you have 10 developers, they won't never pay 5K a month just to have an environment. Then we say, you cannot scale it a little bit down, and then that's okay. If we change the development environment, it is no more production environment, and then we have a problem. But if you use Cosmos DB, let's say, you pay per invocation. But if you're developing, you're not invoking the Cosmos DB a lot, so it is very cheap. So this is what I mean, but it is still the real one. So this is an interesting economic model. So you can have, with managed services, you can have, I would say a really good developer experience for almost no costs. And in production, it's case with the usage. So what can happen is that in production, the managed services become more expensive, than the how to call it, the always running services, or the open source services. But you are I was told by a economic guy, not you, that's called marginal costs. So the cool story is we can go to manager and say, if one invocation costs us $1 and you get revenue $2, no one cares. But if you have a database which runs all the time and no one knows what happens inside, then no one can explain, why we run it at all. So this is the difference.
I see. Sunk cost versus a recurring cost.
Yeah,
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I don't understand necessarily what I said, but this is what managers, care about. So they tell me this, and say, okay, you're right, so then do this. So
yeah, it's capex versus opex from a management standpoint.
Yeah.
Yes, I understand. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to understand. This is your interest. I'm just a developer. So, what are you doing these days at Microsoft?
These days, it's primarily, frankly speaking, enabling all of the Jakarta vendors to be successful on Azure. That's really what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So, based on our customer evidence, I would love to say all of the Jakarta vendors are important, and they are. But to be honest, few are more important than the others. We have a lot of Azure is primarily used by a lot of large businesses, very large businesses, world's largest businesses, to be honest, if I may say so. So Fortune 1000, Fortune 1000, Fortune 500 companies, these kind of companies. A lot of these companies have a lot of old stuff. And a lot of old stuff means WebSphere, WebLogic, JBoss EAP, that kind of thing. Right? So we are working to, we have been working in the past 3 years, Edward Burns and myself, to enable these runtimes to be successful on as many Azure destinations as possible. I think we are almost there, right? So if you look at the majority of the, like if you will, the app servers that are big, large companies are most likely to use, we enable them in most of the Azure destinations. I think the most outer edge example is JBoss EAP on App Service, right? So App Service is basically our premium PaaS offering. You know, we support Java SE there, we support Tomcat there, we support other things like PHP and so on, but we also support Java EE using JBoss EAP. So that is the work we're doing. We are also doing beginning to do some work to enable Quarkus. I think you'll see that, and I don't want to give you too much detail right now. Maybe I come back and talk to you about this in 6 months. But we're also doing some interesting work with Quarkus and Microprofile, aside from the work that we've already done to enable all the Jakarta EE runtimes. In a nutshell, we are making Jakarta EE developers. We are making Azure as Jakarta EE developer friendly as possible.
Okay. We have Azure App Service. There's also Azure Container Apps. And what are the possibilities excluding Kubernetes? Let's say we don't have, AKS. So on which services we could run, let's say, JBoss or Quarkus, doesn't matter, a Java app. So Azure App Service is one thing. Azure Container Apps, another one, right? And to my understanding, they are similar, except, the economics model is different, right? So in Azure App Service, you're paying more or less monthly, and the other one is more serverless, right?
Yes, App Service is mostly oriented towards dedicated plans. So you have to know ahead of time what type of capacity you need, more or less. Right? There is some capacity for doing horizontal scaling, automatic horizontal scaling, and more dynamic billing. But for the most part, it's more oriented towards dedicated capacity. ACA, you are correct. It does scale to 0 if you want it to, literally. Like nothing will be built to you. Up to horizontal scaling. It does come with some trade-offs. That's the primary difference in terms of billing for ACA versus App Service. But also, ACA is the lowest common denominator abstraction is Docker container, or rather, generically a container. Whereas the lowest common denominator for App Service is literally a var or a year or a jar. So that's another difference in the programming model. But billing wise, yes, ACA is more towards sort of pay as you go, whereas App Services, yes, it's a little bit more of a traditional dedicated billing model.
And there's another nice service on Azure which I like a lot. It's called ACI, Azure Container Instances, and this is really simple. The only problem is it doesn't support clustering out of the box, but for simple applications, it's a really interesting one because the configuration is that simple, and I use it already, and it really works, great, and it's simple to configure, right? ACI, okay. I would call it, right?
Okay, so from a PM standpoint, I have to tell you, we are positioning ACA as a replacement to ACI.
Okay.
Just so you are aware.
So I use ACI a lot. ACA was in preview last year, I think, so it's a really fairly new one, right? And Azure App Service,
Azure App Service is very old. It's one of the oldest services we have. ACI is not that old. It is, I think, only about 3 years old.
Yeah.
But we are positioning ACA to essentially more or less replace ACI.
And that's basically it. You have ACI, ACA, and Azure App Service, right?
Well, we have AKS.
Yeah.
We also have ARO. We also have functions.
Yeah, functions. Okay, Azure. Oh, functions are interesting because in function you even have a Maven plugin where you can actually deploy from Maven Azure function, for instance, Quarkus as an Asian function. So it's also really interesting and similar to ACA, but what you will get, you can deploy Quarkus as a JAX-RS, I would say, service. But what happens behind the scenes, the Quarkus is in charge of converting the Azure HTTP event to JAX-RS invocation, right? So this is what happens behind the scenes.
Correct, exactly. It's a Azure Funky, a Quarkus Funky to be more precise, is what you
And
described.
not even funky. So
Specific
funky
model.
is like, the add funky annotations. What you can use the proper JAX-RS.
All right, the Azure, rather the Azure Functions plugin.
Exactly.
Azure Functions.
Exactly. Asian function plugin. I forgot the Maven. What's the name of the Maven plugin is? But this is something like Azure app, and the plugin configures the entire thing. And exactly. So and you said something different. So Azure Container. We said Azure Container
AKS is
functions.
Azure Kubernetes service.
Yeah.
We also have ARO, Azure Red Hat OpenShift. So that's the managed version of
Azure Red Hat opposite.
OpenShift.
Exactly.
So it's going from increasing level of abstractions to lower level abstractions to increasing level of abstractions. You can always run things in virtual machines. Then you can run it on Kubernetes AKS, or you can run it on OpenShift via ARO. Then higher level up would be you can choose to use ACA as you described, and then app service, and then ultimately probably the highest level of abstraction is functions. So there's actually several options along the way, and they're all used. They're all popular, and we're basically taking an N by M approach of enabling each other runtimes in each of these destinations.
And what I also like, if I try to do something more serious with Azure, I really like the bicep language, because it's a real language, and it comes with great Visual Studio Code support. So for to provision the infrastructure, it works good enough. And what happens behind the scenes and translates the state management to ARM, right? Invocations is the ARM templates. And what's also cool, there is a Java API for ARM. And so you can provision the entire Azure with Java, but this is, how to call it, imperative API. So it's not like if you use ARM directly, it's not declarative. You by yourself, you have to be in charge of the state. And with Bicep is more declarative, is more like Terraform, but it's a proper language, which I really like. So you have a for loops and if. So I mean, you can write code, right? So which I really appreciate. So
much better than Terraform in my opinion, but yeah.
I have to tell you, also I don't understand, why programmers pick Terraform, because it is so chatty. It is there is no for loops. You have to get tricks, to do something more meaningful, and I mean, it is very, very it reminds me actually Xdoclet, the early days. If we generated, millions of lines of XML, this is like Terraform, and people started to complain a little bit, but no, for years everyone seemed to be happy. I never understood. It was like, why? And the same, I have to admit, why I never mentioned Kubernetes, because I'm also not that happy with all the YAMLs. Also reminds me, with the Xdoclet and story back then. And the Azure App Service on ACA, I think even ACA uses Kubernetes behind the scenes. I think
ACA
no. There was, but there is something different. It's not Azure. So there is one service which uses Kubernetes behind the scenes, but you never see this. So
it used to be HCA. I think you may be mentioning Azure Spring Apps, but they have also switched over to ACA now.
I think this ACA, right, uses Kubernetes.
ASA, Azure Spring Apps.
Oh no, this is what I never used. Because why I like this Azure Container Instances and Azure App Service, because it is really simple to provision. And what I also do a lot is AWS. For instance, I use Fargate and the others, and people say, okay, but it's not portable. But if I take a look at the Fargate JSON and Azure App Service or ACI JSON, I think port it in a day, right? So this is in both cases like 30 lines of code for a simple container, and you will spend most of the time anyway with identity networks and stuff like that, right?
Sure, it depends on the customer. So a lot of customers, the reason they are using Kubernetes is primarily because it is just one level up from using VMs. So if you're very used to managing your own infrastructure and you want only to use containers instead of VMs, then AKS makes a lot of sense, because direct one-to-one mapping of how you would do things in VMs, only you're using containers instead of using VMs. So this is the reason actually a lot of Our customers use Kubernetes is because it's like sort of VM plus plus, and that's what they call it.
I thought today, you don't have to answer, but what I thought
Yeah.
today is actually that Kubernetes, if you think about this, is actually not cloud native because it tries to hide the entire cloud, and you are running actually, as you said, as in VMs, right? You are naturally not using a lot of cloud services. You hope that you deploy everything to Kubernetes and create your own world, which is not that different to on-premise data centers. It would be and what would if I go to the cloud, it's okay. Cloud just how's a shared responsibility model, so do as much as possible for me, and if there is a service which starts and stops my containers, I'm happy. And we need a liveness probe, a readiness probe is available everywhere. We don't need Kubernetes for it. So this is what Azure App Service is doing, and this ACA Azure Container Apps, I think is the name, is doing, and ACI did as well. And this is why so Kubernetes is okay. I would say if I would invest more in operators or whatever, sure, the Kubernetes is the way to go if you build in products. But from Java perspective, Java E perspective, I would say is this. I mean, I don't care who starts and stops my containers. It should be simple and cheap, right?
Sure. Like I say, flip side of things, the people that tend to use ACA, customers that used to tend to prefer app service or ACA, they're choosing it because they don't want that infrastructure level abstraction, right? So they don't need to be dealing with storage or
Exactly.
load balancers or volume mounts, resource allocation per pod, and those kind of things, right? So they're more comfortable with a higher level of abstraction versus the Kubernetes users that do want that level of control. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So as I said earlier, it's a matter of what level of abstraction are you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, are you happy with the state of the, let's say, Jakarta? Not forget now Azure on microservice, because they also know the Jakarta E ambassador and guardian, of course. Are you happy with state of the union of Jakarta in microprofile?
Not really. I worry a lot. I think some of the things that we had hoped for back in the Java E Guardians days, that has happened, right? So the technology is no longer controlled by a single vendor. It's moved to really at the foundational structural level. It is moved to a vendor neutral space under the Eclipse Foundation. It is now possible to be a spec lead as an individual, like yourself, right? You can if you wanted to be a spec lead, you can be a spec lead. That practically was not really possible under the JCP. So structurally, those things have all been good. We've also not lost many key stakeholders. That is also good. The bad part is, I think the net investment has been reduced.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at the total investment level in Java E8 versus the total investment level in Jakarta E10, I think it represents a smaller investment.
Okay.
So I'm concerned about that.
Mm-hmm.
In one sense, yes, it's a mature technology. It doesn't need as much investment. But I do worry, number one, whether the investment level is correct. And also, I worry whether the community itself is as vibrant as it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
So, as a thought experiment, think of ourselves in the Java E7 timeframe, or even the Java E6 timeframe.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to name 15 people that are advocating Java E6 or Java E7, I think it would be very easy for you to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's as easy now.
Yeah.
Right? I don't think, where is the next generation of Adam?
Yeah.
Where is the next generation of Reza? I look around and I don't see it.
Mm-hmm.
So those things really worry me. So I continue to talk about advocating for Jakarta E, advocating even to a lesser extent for microprofile, and advocating for things like the Jakarta E ambassadors, because without that community dynamic that we also had, it's going to be very difficult. If nobody's advocating for this technology, no one is going to consume it either.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want us to be the last of the Mohicans. We need to expand our tribe at some point.
Mm-hmm. But I think the same is true for Linux and Kubernetes and all the infrastructural, right? Kubernetes also, if you take a look at KubeCon or whatever, the Kubernetes become almost like a boring part. They are moving to more exciting, because it's almost done. I would say no one is excited anymore about Kubernetes. I would say this is my perception, right? No.
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, I don't know, to be honest. I don't know. I mean, no, definitely I don't want to get into this territory, but to some extent, even if you look at .NET, they have the same problem.
Yeah.
A lot of the people advocating .NET are, in their 40s and 50s. Where is the 20-year-old advocate? Where is the 30-year-old advocate for .NET? I think we need to ask ourselves those same questions.
Yeah, you're right. What this would mean is that no one cares about the infrastructure, maybe, and what also means is that people start, to patch more, right? Use a little Python there and something else there until it blows up. So what I remember is why Java EE was so successful at the beginning, around 2000, was because companies had serious trouble in my projects with memory management. Was C++, right? So they didn't manage, to do threading properly, and back then it was really hard. So this is why they moved to Java. And some projects were already in Java, and they had, a real problems with consistency. So I remember all the project. I spent all the time, talking about. I also remember you with the resin back then. Was all about managing transactions, two-phase commit, no caching. There was a major problems with it, because before that everyone did strange things, distributed CMPs or whatever, container managed persistence beans, which never worked. And I think the same can happen right now. That they it already actually happened. So 2 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, I performed a code review in a project with lots of microservices. And no kidding, I think they used Kotlin, TypeScript, Node.js, Quarkus, then Java without Quarkus, and I think Spring in the same project. They had about 20 microservices, and no one knew what's going on. And then I asked the question, I mean, we could just use, just a single language. And they committed just to use Quarkus, and they were happier. So they saw, the I would say the added value of the entire action was, to make everything less complex and more boring, and focus on business. And I would say this can happen again. But you first hit the wall. You have to hit the wall and see, this is not what we had spent time on, to fiddling with all the boring stuff. And this is where Linux or Jakarta EE or microprofile are appealing, because in a new project, either I use Java SE, this is the best, and if so, okay, this won't fly, because, for instance, right now I have to access some APIs, so an HTTP API. So I'm thinking, should I use microprofile REST client or should I use JDK 11 HTTP client, right? So this is my thinking, and this was actually today. So I took a look, at the interfaces. Okay, how many query params I have? Then I would go maybe with microprofile REST client, so it's less code. Or if it's simpler, I will use Java 11 client, which is a little bit more code but no dependencies, which is better. So and this is the question I ask myself constantly. So it's not like I'm really like to use Jakarta EE, but if I wouldn't use Jakarta EE, I would have to do more research, spend more time, fiddling with external dependencies, which I'm absolutely not interested in. So maybe the young people should recognize then, okay, either we can never start researching, and before we start a project, this is what we did at the beginning. I don't know whether you were consulting. I would say at the beginning of Java, right? So in the first phase, we had to evaluate the IDEs all the time. So the second phase was IDE databases. So I spent lots of time object-oriented databases, Echelon, and the XML databases, logging framework, collection frameworks. Was all about evaluation. Every project started with evaluation. Still no, the Rockwave collections and whatever. And then Swing was not there, so there were Swing replacement projects. And now everything is invented. So now it's time to focus on the business, and we somehow forgot that it's already solved problem, right? This is maybe
that could be, yeah. I mean, maybe it's the reason. I think the synopsis of what you describing is, yeah, it's a mature field, and hence it's no longer that interesting. We don't have interesting problems to solve, and hence we don't have new people. Yeah, I hope it's not true. It's possible, but I hope we can find a way to reinvent some things, make it interesting. Because the problem is if there's no new people and no new energy, you and I are not going to live forever.
Yeah.
Not going to be productive forever. So this dies with us then.
Because but one of my attendees said, the Java is the fountain of youth. So this is maybe this. Perfect. So final anecdote, maybe we met at InfoShare conference, the nice one, and we met at the food truck. And you ask me, we will meet later in VIP something. When I say I have absolutely no time, right? I have absolutely no time for your VIP stuff. I really have to prepare. And you were really nicely told me, okay, I understand. Okay, then prepare. And 5 minutes later, we met, in VIP room, VIP lunch. But I had no idea that it was called VIP lunch, because for me, I attended lots of InfoShares. I thought this is like a bar. And I didn't knew that it was for speakers, but I always worry, how it's called, what we got, the hand tag, or what was it? How it's called properly?
Yeah, I think you're referring to perhaps the wristband.
Yeah, wristband, exactly. Okay. And because I had the wristband, they let me in. Always, I never spent time to think that it was just for the speakers. And you asked me the last time, and then I recognized after 10 years of InfoShare that all the time I prepare my talks in your VIP lounge. This was this was funny, and I really felt bad because I told you, I have absolutely no time. And 5 minutes later we met, and you asked me, you said you had no time. So yeah, but I'm preparing right now. But I didn't prepare actually, because I spent time to chatting with you and the other speakers. This was the problem back then. But yeah, it still went well. So the InfoShare was a nice conference and big one, right?
It's a very large conference. I'm really glad that they are having some kind of technical footprint. So I looked at the programs from previous years. I saw you spoke there, but you were only one of the few people, in fact. So by and large, the conference was, I would say, not programming related. It's technical, but not programming related. So I'm very happy. I talked to the organizers later on, and I encouraged them to try to keep it even more technical, because that is where we should be with Java developers right now. Is these large conferences, and we have so few of them anymore. The Java conferences, I don't know if you noticed, but they're getting smaller and smaller. If you remember, DevOps Belgium used to be huge.
Yeah.
Java 1 was huge, almost 11,000, 15,000 people in the heyday, right? And these days, Java conference equals, okay, if you're very lucky, maybe 5,000.
But the DevOps Belgium is still huge, right? No?
Not as easy. Remember in the heyday of DevOps Belgium, when there was no other DevOpses, right? You remember that? It was only DevOps Belgium. And then there was DevOps UK and the DevOps France. And now I suspect what is happening is there's so many DevOpses, like there's all these mini DevOpses, they are cannibalizing their own own attendance. So they're not as big as anymore, because people are going to their quote unquote local DevOps instead of going to the big one, right? The one that attracts 10,000, 15,000 people. So even now DevOps is perhaps in that 5K neighborhood, as opposed to the Java 1 size that it used to, In fact, there's no Java conferences that are more than 10K people at this point.
This is true. But I think DevOps was still sold out immediately, almost.
Yes, I think a few hours. Yeah. That's good. It's encouraging news.
Yeah. Perfect.
Because it's still a Java conference, I think. They added a few things here and there, but still, more or less, still a Java conference. You remember the original name? The original name was
Javapolis.
Javapolis, that's right.
And they were then sued by Sun, actually.
Yeah.
Very good. Reza, I will invite you back to talk about Quarkus on Azure.
Okay, perhaps in 6 months.
Yeah, no problem. So we do, Christmas edition of AirHacks.
Yeah.
And
we can do that.
Where people can find you and your work on Azure or the Azure services or Jakarta on Azure. So I will put all the links to the show notes as well. But maybe you are on Twitter, right?
Yes, best place to be honest is this. So just go to my website. I know it's old-fashioned. these days, but just simply go to reza-rahman.me. So I try to, it's a joke. You asked me to create a joke, so tell a joke, so I will. So I try to maintain difference between church and state, right? So this is the church part. Right? So
Okay.
This is my personal website. I do not. I try not to put in any of my personal, any of my work stuff in here. So this is outside of the day job, right? This is me. This is me in evenings and weekends, right? So if you want to find out about what I'm doing in the evenings and weekends, this is where you go. You go to my personal website.
Okay.
Now, if you want to find out what am I doing in my day job, well, that is not only me yet. That's many people, including Ed Burns, and you find out by going here.
Okay.
Yeah, it's basically the official documentation homepage for Jakarta on Azure. So this lists all of the work that we're doing.
What was the URI again?
Let me see. So the URI for me is very simple. It's reza-rahman@me.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, so it's as simple as that. If you want to learn about Microsoft, it's a little bit more complicated, but not overly so. It's learn.microsoft.com/azure/developer/java/EE.
Very good. Java
slashes.
Perfect. Thank you. So after all these years, I learned about your motivation. Why you so after Jakarta E, and this is because of Freakonomics.
Yep, you can again. It's on YouTube. Just type in Freakonomic take on Jakarta E, and I'm sure it will take you to the right place, and you can check out the talk. I believe I delivered the talk even for the Jakarta Tech Talks, but I've delivered this talk multiple times. I'm pretty sure it's on YouTube already.
Okay, thank you. It was a nice conversation.
Yeah, I know. Hopefully, we didn't bore people to death with all the ancient old people.
No, this is about my podcast. My podcast is unique. People like the old stories, so this is why I'm doing this.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. See you later, man.